This video is sponsored by Asus, who provided me with the RTX 4060 Ti that I'll be pitting against the 1060, 2060 and 3060 Ti cards in this video. Link to their store in this video's description. So benchmarks typically involve keeping the settings the same and seeing how the frame rate varies. But I thought it would be fun to start with the opposite by asking how good can each of these cards make the Talos Principle 2 look at 60 FPS. So I started with the GeForce 1060 being the oldest and slowest of the cards tested. At 1080p low preset with TSR performance upscaling, it managed 57 FPS average in this autumnal forest scene. Close enough. So yes, definitely playable, but with everything so low you're missing out on the game's potentially very gorgeous scenery. The GeForce 2060 allowed me to improve everything. This is now on medium preset instead of low, which of course makes the game look quite a bit more lovely. And since this is one of those games that really benefits from more clarity, I achieved it here by jumping from 1080p to 1440p and from TSR performance to DLSS quality, which helps give this scene enough pixel detail to really fill out the distant trees and grass. And at 66 FPS instead of the 1060's 57, the GeForce 2060 runs this slightly faster too. Now jumping to the 3060 Ti, I pumped all that extra processing power into upping the resolution further, moving from DLSS quality to DLAA. And I still hit 60 FPS average. So while before I was using DLSS quality to upscale the image, it is now processing more than double the number of pixels every frame at native 1440p resolution, using all of DLSS's upscaling trickery simply to boost the clarity of native even further. Sort of like a super form of anti-aliasing. And this is something I'll be covering more later in this video, discussing how DLSS can be used to provide better performance, better visuals, or a bit of both. In this case, it's all being invested into boosting the image quality, which in a highly detailed environment like this one, can further resolve sub-pixel details. And last, for the GeForce 4060 Ti, I turned on DLSS 3's frame generation setting, which let me up it from medium to high preset, and it boosted the frame rate from 60 up to 78. So there you go, that's how 4 generations of GeForce graphics cards can run the same game at the same frame rate, but at different settings. Now for a more conventional comparison. So here's Starfield at ultra preset 1440p to see how all these generations stack up under the same testing environment. And it goes from being a stuttery performance on the GeForce 1060 to a cinematic display on the 2060, and then to a much smoother looking performance on the 3060 and 4060 Ti series of cards. This is a comparison done without any RTX features active at all. Now for the conventional benchmarks. The 4060 Ti is pretty consistently 3 times faster than the 1060 is, all else being equal. So that's good to know. But not all is equal, and this is sadly where we have to say goodbye to the GeForce 1060 since it's the odd one out in this comparison, being the only one that doesn't support RTX features. Some of these features, like ray tracing, improve the graphics in games. Others, like DLSS, help shift the graphics performance balance upwards, allowing for better frame rates, better visuals, or a blend of the two. So here's another bunch of benchmarks, this time with DLSS features activated. The upscaling portion is, in my opinion, a no-brainer to use. DLSS quality is often as good as, or even better looking than native resolution can be. And no matter how you cut it, the frame rate boost with DLSS on is significant. The 4060 Ti also sports DLSS 3's frame generation feature, which can further increase frame rates when enabled. TAA. Does the mere mention of temporal anti-aliasing elicit an emotional response from you? If so, then you're not alone. People hate it right now for how it blurs the image and for how it can leave horrible trails behind moving stuff. This is Red Dead Redemption 2. This is how it looks with temporal anti-aliasing on. It makes it look like all the branches are covered in cobwebs or something, especially when in motion. Look at how sad this guy looks about all of it. This is actually how the game looks by default. So let's disable it. Oh no! Everything's now pixelated. Worse than that, it's flickery pixelated. I don't know what it is about GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2, but they seem to use checkerboarding of some kind on distant and transparent and narrow things, and so this really will not do. We need some form of anti-aliasing. Let's try FXAA. Yeah, nah. We don't need that much blur, plus the shimmering is still a problem. So let's resort to good old MSAA, the good old fashioned method. Why don't we still use that these days? Oh yeah, because it doesn't work. I mean, it does on things like my character's model, it just doesn't on all the problem areas of the image. And since they're problem areas, we need some other kind of fix, something that can, say, smooth out the whole image, with very minimal performance impact. Hence why temporal anti-aliasing has become a thing, because it does at least anti-alias the entire image, and it does so with very little performance impact. But you know what's even better? DLSS, since that comes with negative performance impact. And I think you'll agree it looks better than just TAA on its own. But in a game like this, I'd say we can go even better. And so I enabled DLDSR. This uses some of DLSS's trickery, but for the opposite, in the form of downscaling, which preserves image quality through a resize. Problem is, the moment I did that, the camera moved and the weather turned all foggy. Hence why I've now switched to this location instead. This is temporal anti-aliasing, this is DLSS, this is DLDSR 1.78 times, and DLDSR 2.25 times. Much better. These operate on a higher than native resolution and thus are doing the opposite of upscaling by downscaling the image. DLDSR is the best way to improve image quality if you're not happy with how it looks any other way. It does, however, come with a performance penalty roughly in line with the number at the end of it. Though if you are going to downscale, then Nvidia's DLDSR options are the smartest ways to go about getting more image quality from this approach. They're supported in any RTX card, enabled just here in Nvidia's control panel. You can then set the resolution in-game to the weird ones that appear that seem higher than your monitor's actual resolution. You're welcome. One of the first games to require ray tracing is the new Indiana Jones, a globe-trotting adventure game where you get to hit fascists over the head with all sorts of fun objects. So I devised the perfect benchmark for this game. It starts with a run across a busy courtyard, then Indiana Jones whips and punches a guy, yeets another out of existence, and then gets punched himself. Parkours up some scaffolding, applies a bandage directly to his chest, slides down this rope, whips one last fascist for good measure, and then dives into a restricted area, at which point the benchmark ends. I became very proficient and fond of repeating this exact same test over and over and over again. Using these optimized graphics settings, the GeForce 2060 scored 63 FPS average at 1440p DLSS quality. Already a very playable result. The 2060 Super boosted this to 69 FPS, the 3060 Ti up to 94, and the 4060 Ti, thanks to DLSS 3's frame generation feature, boosted this further all the way up to 108 FPS. We'll leave Indiana Jones to search for his holy grail while we turn to the holy grail of video game graphics. And that's path tracing, where every aspect of the scene is lit and simulated in real time using millions and millions of rays fired about the place. This comes with none of the constraints and limitations of older methods that video games used to have. So for this, I put all of the RTX graphics cards through their paces in Cyberpunk 2077, with the twist being, how could each of these cards make the benchmark look fully path traced at 30 and 60 FPS targets? This is how the GeForce 2060 handles the benchmark at 30 FPS, which it achieved at 1080p using DLSS performance mode. This runs significantly faster than 720p natively does, and here is a side-by-side so you can see how they stack up against each other visually. And remember, this is full-blown path tracing, being done in a AAA title on a first-gen RTX 2060 card. And it's worth noting that when these cards came out, ray tracing was typically limited to being done to just one element on screen, like the reflections or the shadows, yet improved denoising and DLSS version since has helped free up enough extra performance for it to handle full path tracing, albeit at a low resolution. I even managed to get over 60 FPS average by further dropping the resolution and DLSS setting. Now, you probably wouldn't want to play the game in this way, but should you have curiosity for what path tracing can do, it is at least doable on these cards. The 2060 Super fared similarly in these tests, with the same settings required to hit 30 and 60 FPS, so let's move on to the 3060 Ti, which significantly upped the resolutions and DLSS settings. 1080p DLSS performance now scores over 60 FPS average on this card, up from 30 on the GeForce 2060. And if we aim for 30 FPS, the 3060 Ti was able to run the benchmark at 1440p DLSS balanced preset. And last, thanks to the 4060 Ti's frame generation feature, it was able to run the benchmark fully path traced at 60 FPS at 1332p DLSS balance setting. Let's compare this against the 3060 Ti's 60 FPS result. Frame generation has essentially provided a new image quality performance balance that didn't exist previously. We're able to keep this resolution and DLSS setting higher in exchange for enabling frame generation. So it's pretty much two very different ways of hitting the same 60 FPS target, depending on your preference for image quality and responsiveness. Now let's see how the game runs with no DLSS upscaling or frame generation of any sort. So this is the 4060 Ti handling the benchmark at 720p natively. It happens to run almost identically to this, being 1440p DLSS balanced with frame generation on. DLSS has essentially managed to free up all this extra image clarity at no frame rate penalty. So that's how the 60 tier of cards stack up. Check out Asus's store page in the link in this video's description. Their RTX 4060 Ti is a good 3 times faster than the GeForce 1060 in like-for-like comparisons, is about 50% faster than the 2060 series of cards, and more so when it comes to ray tracing performance. And against the 3060 Ti, it delivers a small performance boost overall, but also comes with nice to have extras like AV1 video encoding for better looking video capture at smaller file sizes. It also supports DLSS 3's frame generation technology. And I noticed it consumes a fair bit less power too, averaging under 150 watts in my testing against the 3060 Ti's 200. Thanks for watching.